Alright, let's talk markets. Not the ones where you haggle over a slightly bruised apple, but the big, complicated systems that decide who gets what. Sometimes these markets work beautifully, like a well-oiled machine smoothly churning out iPhones and artisanal cheeses. But other times, and let's be honest, quite often, they completely mess it up. This, my friends, is what economists call a market failure. It's basically when the free market doesn't lead to the best outcome for society. Think of it as the market tripping over its own shoelaces and landing face first in a pile of inefficiency and chaos. You know something's fishy when things aren't working for the common good. So, how do you spot these failures? Well, sometimes it's blindingly obvious. Take public goods, for instance. These are things everyone can use, and one person using them doesn't stop someone else. Think clean air. You breathing it doesn't mean there's less for me, thankfully. Or a public park. Your delightful picnic doesn't prevent my depressing solo contemplation on a nearby bench. The problem is, who pays for them? If a company tried to sell clean air subscriptions, you'd laugh them out of the room, right? So they don't get provided by private businesses because there's no easy way to charge everyone who benefits. This is where the market throws its hands up and says, "Not my problem." Then you have externalities. These are the side effects of making or using something that affect people who weren't involved in the transaction. Pollution is the classic example. A factory might make cheap widgets, hooray! But if it's spewing toxic gunk into the river, poisoning fish and making your tap water taste like regret, that's a negative externality. The price of the widget doesn't include the cost of the dead fish or your medical bills. Similarly, open access resources like fish in the ocean suffer from the tragedy of the commons. If everyone can fish as much as they want, guess what? Soon, there are no fish left for anyone. Brilliant. And don't even get me started on information problems. This is when one side of a deal knows a lot more than the other. Imagine buying a used car from a seller who conveniently forgets to mention it was previously owned by destructive raccoons. You, the buyer, are at a disadvantage. The market can't work efficiently without proper information. Measuring how big these failures are matters hugely. A tiny market hiccup might not be worth massive government intervention, but a catastrophic failure like the entire financial system imploding probably warrants more than a sternly worded memo. So the market's made a mess. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters? No, usually it's the government. They're supposed to step in, fix the problems, and make everything fair and efficient. And sometimes, they actually do a decent job. They provide those public goods we talked about, like national defense or those lovely parks. They try to curb pollution, they set standards. It's all very noble. But so big it needs its own postcode, sometimes government intervention can create a whole new set of problems. This is called government failure. And it's like calling a plumber for a leaky faucet and ending up with a flooded house and a bill for a new speedboat. How does government screw it up? Oh, let me count the ways. Sometimes they do something actively wrong. They might impose regulations that are incredibly costly and achieve very little, like requiring every squirrel to wear a tiny reflective vest for road safety. Or they might set price controls that lead to massive shortages or surpluses. Remember those pictures of empty supermarket shelves? Sometimes that's a government trying to help by telling sellers they can't charge more than a certain price, leading to producers just giving up. It's the economic equivalent of trying to teach a cat to play the ukulele, well-intentioned perhaps, but ultimately futile and slightly absurd. Then there's the sin of omission, when the government does nothing, even when action is desperately needed. Imagine a giant asteroid hurtling towards Earth, and the government's response is to form a committee to discuss the potential impact on quarterly tax revenues. That's a failure of inaction. Or, policies can have unintended consequences that are worse than the original problem. For instance, a subsidy designed to help a struggling industry might just prop up inefficient businesses that should have been allowed to fail, preventing new, innovative companies from emerging. It's like giving a drowning man an anvil for a life preserver. Thanks, but no thanks. And sometimes, governments really shouldn't act at all. If the market is, despite a few quirks, actually working reasonably well, or if the cost and complexity of government intervention outweigh any potential benefits, then stepping in can make things demonstrably worse. It's like that person who insists on helping you pack, but just ends up wrapping all your socks individually in bubble wrap. The cure can indeed be worse than the disease. Identifying when to act and when to just leave it alone is a massive challenge, and one that governments, bless their cotton socks, often get spectacularly wrong. When governments do decide to roll up their sleeves and wade into the messy world of market failures, They have a few tools at their disposal. It's not just about shouting, "Stop doing that," or "Do more of this." Though, admittedly, that's a part of it. One of the most common tools is setting rules, or as they're more formally known, regulations. These are the do's and don'ts. You must install this safety feature. You cannot dump toxic sludge into the playground. All food products must list their ingredients, especially if one of them is surprisingly large amount of sugar. These rules are designed to force or prevent certain behaviors to protect public interest, or correct for those pesky externalities. Another big one is using money, either giving it out or taking it away. Governments can give money or subsidies to encourage good things. Want more solar panels? Give people a tax break for installing them. Want more research into cures for rare diseases? Offer grants. This makes desirable activities cheaper or more profitable. On the flip side, they can make people pay for doing bad things through taxes. That factory polluting the river? Slap a carbon tax on its emissions. This makes harmful activities more expensive, hopefully encouraging the polluter to, pollute less. It's the carrot and stick approach, but with spreadsheets and fiscal policy. Then there are more creative market-based solutions, like creating property rights or tradable permits. For that overfishing problem, you could assign individual transferable quotas, basically giving each fisherman the right to catch a certain amount, which they can then use or sell. Suddenly, they have an incentive to preserve the fish stock because their quota is a valuable asset. For pollution, you can have a cap-and-trade system. The government sets a cap on total pollution, gives out permits to pollute up to that cap, and then lets companies trade these permits. Polluters who can cut emissions cheaply will do so and sell their spare permits to those for whom it's more expensive. Clever, right? Sometimes. And let's not forget tackling those information problems. Governments can mandate disclosure. Think about those calorie counts on menus, or the nutritional information on food packaging. That's the government trying to level the playing field so you know exactly how much sadness you're ingesting with that triple bacon cheeseburger. They can also fund public information campaigns. Smoking kills. Seriously, it's not a joke. These efforts aim to ensure that consumers, workers, and businesses have the information they need to make informed decisions, which is pretty fundamental for a market to function even remotely sensibly. It's about making sure everyone is reading from vaguely the same, hopefully accurate script. So the government has its toolbox brimming with regulations, taxes, subsidies, and fancy permit schemes. But how do they decide which tool to use? It's not like they just close their eyes and pick one out of a hat, though sometimes it feels that way. Ideally, policy analysts engage in a rigorous process of comparing different policy ideas. They look at the costs and benefits of each option. Will this new clean air regulation save 1 million lives, but cost $1 gazillion and bankrupt half the country? Or will a small tax on plastic bags mildly inconvenience shoppers, but significantly reduce plastic waste? These are the kinds of calculations they're supposed to be making. But it's not just about the cold, hard numbers. Fairness or equity is also a massive consideration. Who bears the cost of a new policy? Who reaps the benefits? A policy might be super efficient economically, but place a huge burden on the poorest members of society. That's generally not a good look, or a good outcome. Analysts also have to consider if the policy will actually work in the real world, its feasibility. Does the government have the capacity to enforce this new rule? Will people actually comply, or will they find ingenious ways to get around it, as people so often do? A theoretically perfect policy is useless if it's impossible to implement, or if everyone just ignores it. Let's take an example. Say a city is choked with traffic congestion, a classic externality where each additional car slows everyone else down. Policy option 1, build more roads. Costly, might just attract more cars. Option 2, charge a congestion fee for driving downtown during peak hours. This could reduce traffic, raise revenue for public transport, but might hit lower-income commuters harder. Option 3, invest heavily in amazing public transport. Expensive, takes time, but could offer a great long-term solution. Analysts would model the impacts of each, looking at traffic reduction, economic effects, public acceptance, and who wins and who loses before, hopefully, recommending the best path forward, or perhaps a combination of approaches. Finally, and this is crucial, governments absolutely must check if their fixes are actually working. It's not enough to launch a shiny new policy and then just walk away, patting themselves on the back. They need to monitor the outcomes, collect data, and see if the policy is achieving its goals without causing a cascade of new, unforeseen disasters. And if it's not working, or if circumstances change, they need to be willing to adapt, tweak, or even scrap the policy and try something else. This continuous evaluation and improvement is vital. Because let's face it, getting policy right is hard, and the only thing worse than a market failure is a government fix that digs an even deeper hole. Constant vigilance, people.